Join me as I explore the exciting world of model railways with behind-the-scenes features, step-by-step tutorials, interviews, videos, reviews and much, much more. I'm Dawn Quest and I love building model railways. Hornby, one of Britain's most iconic model railway brands, and it's the company I get asked the most questions about from subscribers. So I decided to pop down to the Wonderworks, the company's headquarters down in Margate, where I spoke to Martyn Weaver, the brand MD for Hornby Hobbies. And as usual with these types of interviews, I came armed with your questions. Martyn Weaver, brand MD for Hornby Hobbies, thank you for taking your time out of your busy day to talk to me today. And I'm going to just dive right in and start with day one back at Hornby. Take me back to your first day as brand leader at Hornby. What was the vision? What was the priority in terms of goals you wanted to achieve and the issues you wanted to fix?
Well, actually, my first time at Hornby was actually quite a long time ago in 2007, which was just after when Hornby actually bought the Airfix brand. So we brought a whole new brand into the portfolio. We had Hornby and Scalextrics at that time and a number of international railway brands, but it was quite a big acquisition and move for the business. And then I went on to work on Hornby Railways for a bit, that time many years ago, and then Corgi, and then I left and I came back into the business. I've worked on Scalextric, but more recently on Hornby Railways, which I joined in September. And coming back into the business, it was kind of very clear that there had been in recent years much of a greater focus on the hobby side of the business, which is very, very important. But being a father of two young children, I'm very sort of conscious of the future. And so whilst we have the hobby side of the business, which we kind of want to continue to grow, there is this huge sort of opportunity beyond that. Whether it's kids and trains, there are 600,000 kids born every day in this country, and a good percentage of them will be into trains. They have been since 200 odd years ago, probably. And it's about having something for them. And in addition to that, we as a brand have been going for over 100 years, and there must be millions and millions of people who have kind of played, built, operated model railways, and they love it and they have a great time. We see it at shows, and I think if more people knew about that and experienced it, then that would be even bigger. And one of our big visions is going to be to kind of go out, find those people and bring them into the hobby.
Fantastic. I'm really impressed that statistic about how many babies are born every day. That's pretty impressive. But getting back to that, I guess, every time I'm at a model railway show and I ask the question, do you have a layout? A lot of the time I don't, but I used to. And I say, I bet it was a Hornby 00. And they're like, yes, it was. Do you find that there's a big responsibility on your shoulders, that heritage, it's an iconic brand? Do you feel that weight of responsibility about carrying it forwards?
Oh, most definitely. Firstly, from a brand point of view, to kind of be given the reins almost of such a great brand that's been going such a long time with a lot of eyes on it within the hobby. There's that. And then there's also the bigger part of it, not just the brand, but even if when I talk to competitors, they'll quite frank and say that Hornby in many ways is the lifeline to the future in the hobby. With the sets that we do, quite often it's Hornby product that brings people into model railways or back into model railways. So kind of there's even bigger responsibility there, but with that comes a kind of huge opportunity, which is very exciting.
Speaking of opportunity, TT, has it performed as well as you imagined it would?
And I have been asked this question a few times, and it's there are different ways of answering it. So if we kind of looked at it more from a commercial perspective of, is it delivering the numbers? The answer is yes, it has proved to be successful. Has it kind of delivered in getting out to new people? From what we've seen from the people that are buying it and new social media groups, we believe that it's not a cannibalization. So we believe that to be a kind of a huge success. And then the final part is, we've our kind of entry set, which is called the Eastern, we've gone out of stock on it twice. So that sort of says that in some ways it has gone kind of beyond what we maybe would have thought early on it would do. So it's in a very positive place at the moment.
Is there something of a bit of a lag between it being launched and the rest of the industry catching up? I say that because at model railway shows, I don't see many TT layouts. The only one I've seen is in Belgium, actually, at Mob Expo. It was the first one I've seen, and it was pretty amazing. Is the rest of the industry taking time to catch up?
Well, there are two folds in that. So if you look at it from an event perspective, a consumer event, a lot of those layouts that you see there have been worked on for a number of years, probably beyond 18 months and more. And the people that have built them have got various accessories and rolling stock around. So I believe that those people will eventually bring into it. And then you've got quite a new audience come into TT. Can you imagine that starting out in model railwaying, how many years, how far down the line do you have to be until you're confident enough to build an amazing layout and enter it in a show? I don't think we're kind of quite there yet. And then from a manufacturing standpoint, I think it's really understanding that not everyone's going to jump in it from day dot. We're seeing more and more accessory things coming into the market from other manufacturers, Track, etc. So there's definitely momentum building, but I don't think, Hornby didn't really tease this. They announced it, they came out with it, and their product shortly followed. So there was no time for other manufacturers who, like us, will have 18-month, 2-year lead times, whatever, to join in. And it'll be very interesting to have this conversation in 2 years to see who is or who isn't is out of the scale.
Absolutely. And I have to say, and you've probably been asked this many, many times, of all the gauges out there, you go and reinvent or reintroduce one that, was first launched in late 40s, 50s. What was the thinking behind that? Why not explore more N gauge or O gauge? What was the thinking behind TT? So
with TT, I deem it the perfect scale. Now that could upset a lot of people because if you're an N scale, you're a double O, HO or O gauge. Obviously, everyone's got their own thing that they're into. But I think now, if you're starting out, it is a perfect place between where maybe double O offers space issues, as in room in the home, room in the garage, spare bedroom, attic, whatever it be, offers kind of a few issues to what you can do. You can still build amazing layouts, but you have to compromise on reality. An example of that is, if you want to run a class 43, to do that at the full rake of coaches in double O, that is a very big layout. It's a very long station. But in TT, it becomes actually achievable. And I think for that reason, I think if we were starting from absolute ground zero with model railways, from a hobby perspective, we would look at TT. However, scales like double O are perhaps much more interesting for kids because TT is quite fiddly. It's smaller. The smaller they get, the harder it is to put on the rails. So these two things do have a space. And TT always just feels like that perfect bit in between.
So the price point, we get asked about this a lot. I get a lot of subscribers talking about the price, the cost. Price point of TT still above what you'd pay for double O. Am I right in thinking that?
They're on par. So TT, the models released in TT so far are what we would deem high detail. So if you took the amount of detail on them versus a double O equivalent, they would be in that. So and you look at the pricing of them, they're actually quite similar. And the reality is they cost a very similar amount to produce. The real cost on producing model rail items isn't in the raw material, it's not in the plastic, it's not in the paint, it's in the detailing and the level of components and the level of electronics. And essentially, that level of electronics and workload for decoration and assembly is the same whether it's this size, or that size. And that's why you see the pricing to be about the same.
Well, coming to that, one of my subscribers, Stephen, has asked, how does Hornby see the cost versus detail balance moving in the future? As in, will more detail and features continue to drive up prices, or will the market demand more reasonably priced, less intricate models?
So there are both things going on there. So there is definitely a demand for high detail, for more innovation, and then if you pick up a lot of the model railway press and the things that people get really excited about, it's finite detail or it's working features if it's in, say, video content. So there is definitely a demand there to kind of progress in that way. And every time you do that, the cost of it goes up, whether it's more components, more decoration, more sort of stages in development and assembly. So that will go up. However, and we've seen it especially in recent years with the second-hand market and with our own railroad range, which is our kind of more basic option, there is a market there for that as well. And there are people out there who want high detail, they want perfection. And there are a lot of people out there that want to drive trains, and they might just say they're not so worried about the detail. There's a good chance they want to drive trains with grandchildren or children. So having a high detailed locomotive to put on off the track or run off or derail or something like that can be kind of quite costly or difficult to fix.
Do you think there's enough of the lower priced items there to attract people into the hobby and keep them there if everyone's struggling with the cost of living right now?
don't think there is, and you will see that in coming years with our railroad range, and we've been lucky that we can kind of differentiate and utilise kind of older tooling. But no, I think there's definitely a bigger space for that, and there are two worlds. And the great thing about those two worlds is they are 100% compatible with each other. So if you do have a high detailed loco and perhaps lower detailed coaches or wagons, they can compact, you can still run them around together.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of, families with small children who want to get them started, and everything looks so expensive, doesn't it? But on that note, on railroad, I know you've talked about railroad in the past. What I see at the shows, lots of young children, you just have to show them a train and they're instantly hooked. But then there's this gap, there's this fall off. Children grow up, become teens, and there's this natural fall off.
Yeah.
What do companies like Hornby have to do to keep children engaged through the teen years into adult years, or is it just something you naturally accept that teenagers will lose interest?
So for many, many years, there's been an acceptance that when a child gets to sort of teens or just pre-teen, they will lose interest in playing with toys, and that does happen. Whether it's because of they want to spend their time on something else, or whether they don't want it in their bedroom, or they don't want their friends to know about it. There are a whole host of reasons why people kind of have historically moved away from it. And then what we used to quite often see, especially with men, because we never really grow up, they would kind of come back around to it, and having toys out again is cool. Now, that is still existent, but I think there is perhaps some early sort of signs coming that might not be the same, but I think it'll be consumed in a different way. And what I mean is that kids will play with trains up to a certain age, and I think there's still a chance they could move away. But I think that stage where they may come back into it could potentially come down, but it won't necessarily be solely around driving trains. It perhaps be more around the modelling and more the creative, creating their own miniature world. I think that could kind of play a factor as things change, because we have changed as people. There's no doubt about it, over the 100 years since Hornby's going, for sure.
Any plans for Airfix and Hornby to join forces and create a model kit that teens can build or other people can build?
So, I mean, Airfix historically has had model kits of locomotives, albeit a long time ago, and I'm pretty sure the tooling for that doesn't exist anymore. So from a Hornby perspective, when it comes to the kind of the rolling stock and the locomotives, we're not going to go into a kind of a kit, build your own thing where you can buy components and decorate your own. That's, we've just kind of set our stall out in that we're going to be kind of a ready to run brand. And then from the Airfix side of it, can then skilled modelers then decorate things. You do see it now. You see people weathering locos. You see people changing the livery of locos. It's actually really hard work. Especially you've got belly bands around a tank and things like that. It's really quite specialist. And I think something for the teen market that's a very hard place to start, and you don't want to start with something that's difficult where you don't succeed and then you pack it away. Wagons, maybe that's perhaps a potentially different argument, but I think that a bigger opportunity maybe isn't so much around the rolling stock, but the kind of creating your own world. We live in a world that essentially we can't create, and we're governed by certain things, and we're now probably more sensitive than ever to that. But to be able to kind of create your own street or your own island or whatnot, be through model railway, and decorate it as you wish, even bring science fiction into it if you want. That's where I think perhaps the potential opportunity is. That then maybe it takes it away from Airfix a bit, but it definitely links into kind of Hummer, as well as our own scenic products and a lot of other things that are out there in the marketplace.
Are teens not interested because they're just not being marketed to in the right way, or you're not marketing to teens because there's no interest? Which is it?
I think there's a limited interest. And so therefore, for that reason, it will not be a focus of marketing. I think it's probably impossible to develop a particular type of product to appeal for that sort of period age range, because they're all into different things. But the likelihood is that many will return. If you go to a model railway show, or even model railway clubs, you will see teenagers there. And quite often it's linked to the kind of the family side of things. And if I go back to when I was a teenager, which was a long time ago, there was probably a stigma attached to that. You probably wouldn't shout across the secondary school classroom that you're into model railways. But now we live in a very different place. And I think if you do that, it's not deemed nerdy or uncool anymore. If anything, it's a bit quirky. And that is quite often appealing. So this side of society is changing, I believe, in a positive way. But to market it is kind of quite a challenge. And I think for that particular age segment, you'd you'd almost wait for them to kind of come to you, whether it be through friend or through family or whatnot, then go out there and find them. But you do see teams at model railway events. They are there. It's just to do with the percentage thing.
Play trains you discontinued.
Yes.
Possibility of a new range for children for Hornby?
It is something we would most definitely be looking at. And we now have an insights facility inside the business, so we can actually take much more of a consumer-centric approach to how we produce things than what we have done historically. Historically, we kind of have looked at how it's always happened and kind of continue with that. And that's not necessarily the right thing to do. So we have a big project going on at the moment, and there will be more to follow on that, but I can't tell you more about it today, I'm afraid.
What do you think was wrong with the play trains model, if anything? Obviously, something was wrong for it to be discontinued. What do you think? Where did it miss the mark?
So my observation and the business observation, what we found from it was when you look at the actual train set itself, which was a nice, robust product, it was really good. Really, when you look at kind of how complex it would be to put those on the rails or use the hand controller, you're really looking at a child who's perhaps 6, 7, maybe 5. But yet the way in which the product was presented, it was presented more as preschool. So you had it being people looking at it straight away and maybe not thinking about the functionality and the complexity side of it, and then giving the product to a preschool age child. And then there was a chance that then they would have a less satisfactory experience with it because they can't operate it. So it was a positioning thing more than anything. There wasn't kind of anything out and out wrong with the product. And going back to what I was saying a moment about where we're going insight-led, it's much better for us to say we're not doing that anymore, and we'll kind of come back when we're ready with the right thing and the right story to go with it.
And will that right thing include a steam train?
I would expect so, yeah. I mean, people often say, well, kids don't often see steam trains, unless you live near a main line and there's a charter goes past, or whether you go to a heritage railway. But kids still associate trains and steam trains. A lot of the time, if I'm honest, I don't know where they get that association from. Maybe it's Thomas, or maybe it's something else. But if you were to go into, I would imagine, into a lot of nurseries in this country and say to a child, draw a train, it'd be quite amazing the percentage of them which would attempt to draw a steam train.
The model railway industry has had its fair share of challenges, and it seems not a year goes by without people saying the model railway hobby is dead or dying. Clearly it isn't. What challenges do you think manufacturers and retailers are facing, and what do you think are the solutions?
So, yeah, there are challenges there within it. And a lot of this comes back to kind of the hobby piece. We spoke about pricing earlier, where the hobby has driven to detail. Over years it's evolved, especially since manufacturing went to China, where it was an opportunity to kind of upgrade things. We've gone down a certain route of high detail, which really furnishes an existing base of consumers. But it's maybe then difficult to join on later. If someone comes at it 20 years later, that's quite a heavy step, whether it's to do with price, whether it's to do with knowing how it works, or even handling it. So I think one of the big opportunities goes back to having kind of much more sort of simplistic products and be able to take people on a journey. And that's not just talking about kids. That's talking about adults as well. So that is, as much as it's a challenge, it's also an opportunity. And also coming out of a pandemic, which for hobbies was perhaps potentially quite a good thing because it drove people into hobbies. That also promotes now an opportunity where to have a hobby is deemed to be much more of a positive thing than something that went at the bottom of your CV 10, 15 years ago. It has more meaning to it. So with every challenge that there is an opportunity, but we have seen rising costs. We are living with the cost of living. You think things are tough. It's not easy out there for everyone. The way in which people buy products and shops closing down on the high street. There are, you always hear about, there used to be a model shop in my local town, and it's not there anymore. And that's true, so many have gone, but then many have survived. And then on occasion, some new ones pop up, and it's a lot of the time it's to do with how the hobby and the retail industry actually reacts to change. And, the companies that have been strong with online have prospered.
Well, as usual, when I interview somebody, I invite subscribers to send their questions. And as you might expect, I got quite a few. So thank you for answering these. Richard West would like to know, is Hornby going to produce a 00 scale Invicta locomotive with sound and smoke and rope-hauled wagons, not later than the bicentenary of the Canterbury and Whitstable Railway in May 2030?
Well, the good news is I know the exact loco that he's talking about, so I knew it used to sit outside of... in Canterbury many years ago. So if someone had asked that question 6 years ago, it would have been quite a flat no, because no one was producing anything really of that era. But now we are, with what we've done, and it's proved very popular. You can't say now that would be a factor. Whether we'd be able to fit sound and steam generator into something of that size right now, steam generator would be no. We couldn't do it with the technology we have now. Sound maybe, but fast forward to 2030, maybe it could. A rope pulled wagon, that could possibly work as well. So it's majority of those things aren't out of question, but I definitely won't want to promise them.
Okay, Richard, you heard it here first. So, Maura would like to know, when will HM7000 6-pin decoders be released or in stock?
I'm afraid we don't have an exact date on that. The decoder is still in development. So I think it's very unlikely to be this year at the moment, I'm afraid.
And she also asked, when will steam generator Flying Scotsman and Black 5 be in stock?
Well, the great news is that the steam generator Flying Scotsmans are on their way. I actually have one behind me there. Sadly not running, so you can't see the steam going, but they're on their way. So we envision launching those in June. So they'll be, if you've got one on pre-order, you'll be getting one through the door in June. And the Black 5 is tracking more towards October at the moment. So with the steam generator versions, it's not just simply the same model. There are various amounts of modifications inside, and a lot of these locos aren't exactly the same inside where things are configured and positioned. So we have to go through quite a testing period. It's not like with a speaker where you can almost locate it anywhere in the loco. The steam generator element has to obviously be right beneath the chimney. So that does add some complexities.
Mike Buckley, will Hornby be bringing down the often very long times between advance or pre-orders and delivery? He says all too often this can be well over a year.
It sadly is. He's exactly right, and I don't believe that's right for anything. And there have been, in the last sort of 3-4 years, that there have been a whole host of reasons from a development or other things that are going on out in the wider world that have affected that. But something that we're looking to do going forward is that when we announce a product, whether it's in January or it's in mid-year, we want to be a certain way down the development line. So we will actually be able to, so especially if it's a new tool item, we'd be able to show you something. So for example, in January when we launched Locomotion, we had something there. It wasn't just a picture in the catalogue. And then there can always be issues in development, but just going further down the line before announcing it just means it's much more likely to come within the period that we've said it will, or be closer. Other manufacturers take different approaches sometimes and sort of publish, or we're making this with photos and measure the market. At Hornby, we're still sticking to the kind of route we always have been, where we say we're doing something and it'll be our intention to do it.
On that note, my own question, from the moment an idea gets put across, the board and everyone agrees on it and green lights it, how long does it take for it to become a product that someone can hold in their hands?
It's normally 18 months. If it's a re-livery on a wagon or a coach, it can be half that time almost, potentially. But we normally allow around about 18 months. Something like Locomotion, we started the project a bit earlier because of the complexity of it. If it was a much more simpler 060 loco, which is much kind of more our bread and butter and what we've got a lot of experience in making, we'll be sticking to an 18-month mark.
Stephen Davis asks, as the demographic of those in the hobby changes, is Hornby seeing greater demand for more modern era models?
We are, and we can only really fully gauge that by what we sell. And steam is still very popular, and bringing out a new steam locomotive still is probably one of our absolutely strongest areas from a kind of a sales perspective. But there's definitely demand for kind of modern image, and I think that's to be expected because it's what people are seeing. You have a lot of people, for example, that work on the railways. They're very interested to buy something that they see every day, or they potentially drive or work on, and that's obviously more likely to be something modern image than steam. And then you've got a generational shift, so that will then mean that kind of a lot more people are remembering the diesel era as opposed to the steam era. Now that varies by where you are in the country. I mean, I grew up in the slam door era, so maybe there'll be a time when that's the more prominent, or that period is more prominent. So I think there are definitely changes, but the nostalgic element of it and the steam part of it, there's still always a huge demand for it there. Going back to the point about kids still loving steam engines and choosing those. So I think everything will always be there. I mean, one of our most popular eras of modern railwaying has been things like Locomotion, and there'll be no one alive that really remembers that in full service. Well, they're lucky if they are. So yes, there is a demand, they're growing, but the other parts aren't falling away really.
Getting back to the Black 5, Stephen says, it looks superb, but how is Hornby dealing with the numerous reported problems that have been experienced by buyers, and how worried is the company that the most recent incarnation of one of its traditional flagship models is disappointing many of its loyal customers?
Yeah, that's something that's been a very serious talking point here in the last sort of 2 to 3 weeks when we first started hearing reports of it. And interestingly, the first reports of it came through the world of forums rather than our kind of designated customer care team. And with these, we'll always listen to it and see what people are talking about and what the potential problem is. And there have been some issues there. There's no doubt about it. Our main focus is correcting that. It's correcting it for future, and it's potentially repairing or replacing or whatever it be what people have already got. And the complaints that have come directly into us, I can count on one hand. So sometimes, and this is why we never jump straight away, because sometimes a few problems can be voiced and carry big voices, and it not necessarily is bad. And another factor with the Black 5, if it's anything to do with kind of the functionality, the build or the running, then that's something really serious we'll work on. But it's because if someone doesn't like the lamps on it, which is a feature of it, then that's perhaps a bit more of a personal preference. And we've been at shows since we kind of first announced and launched models with lamps, and yes, there are a few come over and say they don't like it, and there are many that do like it. So it'll be interesting to see over time how that shift is as we do some with and some without.
Listening to your customers, your most important people, I would imagine, how much do you engage with associations, for example, like Dover Double O Gauge Association, in terms of when you're choosing products or when you're choosing new lines? Do you kind of talk to them and get their opinion on where you should be going, or is it all come from in-house?
So no, and we get a lot of our guidance from what we talk to people about at shows. There are polls out there which are gathered to see what people apparently want, and we have worked those in the past, and sometimes actually they haven't necessarily proved, when it gets to the wider audience to manufacturing, to actually be the right choice. And the problem is you never know until you've actually done it. But the main thing is we have a lot of knowledge within the walls of Hornby, so we use that along with what people are saying at shows, and that's one of the real important reasons. And when we go to a show, we generally don't go with one person. We take people from marketing, we take people from development, and we listen. It's not just about product ideas, but it's also about how people are using them, the bits they like, the bits they don't like. When it comes to sort of more the society and model railway clubs, that they have some really useful insight for us, but it's not necessarily so much about what locomotive to do, but it's more about how things run and how you model, and is this compatible with that? Have you ever thought of doing this? So quite often, some of the knowledge that we get from Model Railway Club actually goes a bit towards our innovation on what we're going to do next. So that it all has its place from an information perspective that which we then use.
Trevor asks, Trevor Welsh, will Hornby be breaking into the American freight market? A highly detailed Union Pacific SD70 Ace would be exciting to see.
Obviously, there's a personal request in there for that. So the American market is an interesting one. It's an established market, predominantly HO, a bit of N. So in some ways, from a scale perspective, you could say it's quite similar to the UK, albeit we're double O and N being the secondary scale. So I think there is an opportunity. I mean, you've got some big players in the US market. So to kind of come from the outside into that, you have to really be offering something that either compats well as something a bit new, and that's something which in our immediate plans isn't a priority, but it's definitely something that we're not kind of ignoring or discarding. We'd ever look at, especially with bringing TT to market.
Andrew Knights asks about the serviceability and durability of models. This seems to have dropped off greatly in recent times. No availability of such items as motors for replacement, and models that are almost impossible to service due to constructional issues. Will we see improvements, or are we in the era of showcase collector modelling?
So that really depends on what model he's talking about, because if you look at what's happening as more of a general sweep as we go forward, we're doing more detailed models, but then we've made it much easier to access through the chassis. So, for example, for any kind of servicing, years ago you'd have to unscrew and then you'd have wires coming out of pickups. Now that's still done off kind of push connectors. So in some ways, a lot of things are actually easier than they ever were to. But then if you're talking about a model maybe 5-10 years older, that could be kind of quite difficult. Then also, if you factor in that we've gone into greater detail on models, that does make them harder to kind of get inside and do anything too. From a spare parts and motors perspective, we try our hardest to have stock of spares, but given the tens of thousands of locomotives that we've produced over 100 years, and all the different components and all the different motors, there's no way we would be able to keep every single one of those in stock. Some of those you can't even make anymore, probably. So, but anything that's kind of current and come out in recent years, we try to have in stock and available where we can.
Graham Bell, I love this question actually. He says DCC and DC, often people get really confused and they have to check, do you mean DCC or do you mean DC? Can we not just go back to analog and digital? What are your thoughts?
Well, that's a good point, but then it's terminology, really, isn't it? And it is a very valued point. When you look at our catalogue, whether you're talking about HM, DC, or DCC, you do have to have an element of knowledge to get around, and that goes back to something I was saying earlier about kind of new entrants coming in. Everything has evolved, and everyone that's been along that journey understands it. But people coming in kind of part of the way through, there are a lot of confusions there. So I actually think that there is probably a lot more that we could do to make that kind of easier to understand, whether it's a simple intro video that goes on our website that explains it or whatnot. But that's a very valued point.
Question for me. So 5 years from now, where is Hornby going to be? What's your vision?
So in 5 years from now, I would love to, I'd love to be having to wear some quite significantly different hats. And what I mean by that is I would love to be going to market with a toy product, which is, it's in all the major toy retailers and everyone kind of knows about it. And we have to do the relevant marketing and talk to the relevant people, develop the relevant products for that audience, and be able to sort of really begin the journey of kids that like trains and potentially like trainers at a much, much younger age. Then another hat would be bringing more people into this kind of wonderful hobby that we're all in. What do we need to do that, and to have that kind of in place, which to be honest is probably more of a marketing thing based on a product thing. That for me would be a huge achievement, to sort of seeing that the amount of people that are buying train sets, the amount of people that are potentially buying magazines or following social media groups, to see that number go up. That would be a huge part of our vision and satisfaction. And then finally is bringing out more great hobby products for the kind of, let's call it the existing consumers, and bringing more innovation into play as well, with taking HN7000 to the next level. So there are three kind of real key pillars of where the vision will be in the future. And there's a lot of work to do between now and then, but we're making the right tracks for it.
Which I have to ask one more question then. Just how do you get more people into the hobby?
But that's a challenge, isn't it? And that's the bit we're working on, because you can just increase your marketing significantly. That's where some industries, that's the approach that's taken. Sometimes it's through products, sometimes it's through distribution. I think it's actually getting the mixture of all three of those right at the right time. And it won't be easy, and there will be many things which we'll rely on others to do. If it's something that we can't control, it will be the audience or the consumer that's actually driving that. But yeah, it's a bit of a tough one to do, and that's one of the big things we'll be working on.
Lovely. Martyn Weaver, Brand MD at Hornby, thank you so much. That's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
If you like this video, please do like, share, and of course subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of all my future videos. I'm Dawn Quest, and this is Model Railway Quest.